Pay attention to the people around you who talk about money the most, the ones who mention their salary in the third sentence of meeting you, the ones who tell you what their house cost, what their car cost, what their vacation cost, before you asked or wanted to know, the ones who drop numbers into conversations the way other people drop names, casually, habitually, as if the figures themselves were a form of identity, a way of establishing what kind of person they are, and where they stand in relation to everyone else in the room. Pay attention to those people, and then notice something. They are almost never the richest person in the room. The truly wealthy do not talk about money, not because they have been trained in some secret code of discretion, not because they are playing a sophisticated social game of understatement to avoid envy or attention. They do not talk about money because they do not need to. And the difference between needing to talk about money and not needing to is one of the most revealing indicators of genuine financial security that exists. More revealing, in many cases, than the actual numbers. I want to explain why, not as a social observation, not as a piece of etiquette advice, but as a window into the psychology of real wealth versus performed wealth, which are two entirely different things that the modern world has become extraordinarily confused about. Because the confusion between performing wealth and having wealth is not an innocent misunderstanding, it is one of the most expensive confusions a person can carry, and the person who understands the difference really understands it at the level of behavior, rather than just intellectual agreement, has access to a financial clarity that most people spend their entire lives without ever finding. Let me start with what the talking reveals. When someone talks about money frequently, what they are actually communicating is that money occupies a significant amount of their mental and emotional space, not their bank account, their head, their identity, their sense of where they stand in relation to other people. Money that has found its way into frequent conversation has found its way there because it is doing something in the speaker's psychology beyond simply existing as a financial resource. It is functioning as a status signal, as a reassurance mechanism, as a way of establishing value in contexts where the person does not feel their value is otherwise apparent or secure. The talking is the symptom. The symptom points to a specific underlying condition, and that condition is the experience of money as something that is still being figured out, still being established, still being proven, rather than something that is simply present and doing its work in the background of a life. The truly wealthy stopped figuring out money a long time ago, not because they stopped caring about it or stopped thinking about it carefully, but because their relationship with it resolved into something functional and stable rather than something anxious and performative. Money, for them, became a tool, and people do not talk about their tools. You do not walk into a room and mention your hammer before anyone asked. You do not introduce yourself by describing the specifications of the drill you own. Tools are used, not displayed. And for the person who has developed a genuinely settled, functional, non-anxious relationship with money, that is what it is. A tool, present when needed, unremarkable when not a central feature of their identity or their social presentation, or their internal monologue. This distinction matters far more than it might initially appear, because the way a person relates to money inside their own head, whether it is anxious or settled, performed or functional, identity-defining or merely useful, determines the quality of the financial decisions they make, far more reliably than the amount they have. The anxious relationship with money produces performing behaviors. The performing behaviors are expensive, and the expense of performing wealth is one of the primary mechanisms through which people who earn significant income, nevertheless, fail to build significant wealth. They spend what they should deploy, they display what they should compound. They seek validation through consumption rather than building through investment. And they talk about money constantly because the talking is part of the performance, part of the mechanism through which they are attempting to manage an internal anxiety that more money, by itself, never resolves. But I have watched this pattern across decades of observing how people build, maintain, or lose financial positions. The pattern is remarkably consistent. The people who talk about money most are not building wealth. They are performing it. And performing wealth is not only financially expensive in the direct sense of the resources it consumes, it is strategically expensive in the sense that it keeps the person's attention, energy, and financial decision-making oriented around the impression they are creating, rather than the assets they are building. You cannot optimize two things simultaneously. You cannot optimize your financial life for the building of real wealth, while also optimizing it for the performance of wealth to an audience. These are different games with different rules and different resource requirements, and the person who is playing both at once is playing neither well. Let me make the cost of the performance concrete, because it is easy to dismiss as a soft psychological observation rather than a hard financial reality. The performance of wealth has a measurable price tag that most people are paying without ever itemizing it. The car that signals your income bracket costs not just its monthly payment, but the insurance premium that scales with its value, the depreciation that runs at 15 to 20% per year on a new vehicle, and the opportunity cost of the capital tied up in that signal, rather than deployed into something that compounds. On a $40,000 vehicle financed over 5 years, the total cost, including interest, insurance premium above what a cheaper vehicle would cost, and depreciation, typically exceeds $60,000 over the ownership period, against the alternative of a reliable $15,000 vehicle and $35,000 invested at a moderate return over that same period. The gap that opens up is not incidental. It is the difference between starting to build something and choosing not to. The house that announces its price through its size, its neighborhood, and its address costs not just the mortgage but the property taxes scaled to the signal, the maintenance that scales with the square footage, the furnishing and the decoration of spaces that are being maintained for visitors rather than inhabited by occupants, the vacations photographed for social media rather than experienced for rest, the restaurants chosen for their recognizability rather than their food, the wardrobe curated for its signals rather than its function. None of these individual costs is extraordinary, but they share a common source, which is the decision to allocate financial resources toward the performance rather than the building. And that common source, feeding all of those streams simultaneously across a working life, produces the outcome that surprises people who earned significant money and arrived at the end of the earning years with far less than they expected. Not because they were reckless, because they were performing, and the performance costs more than most people ever stop to calculate. Now I want to go deeper, because the silence of the truly wealthy is not only about the absence of anxiety, it contains something more active and more deliberate than simply not needing to perform. The silence is a form of intelligence, and understanding what that intelligence consists of changes how you think about your own relationship with money and what you reveal about it to others and to yourself. The first dimension of the wealthy person's financial silence is the understanding of what information costs. Every piece of financial information you share about yourself creates an adjustment in how other people relate to you. Some of those adjustments are harmless, many are not. When you reveal your salary in a social conversation, you provide every person in that conversation with a reference point for every future professional interaction they will have with you. If they ever become a counterparty in a negotiation about your compensation or the price of your services, they now have a floor that they will work from, rather than letting you establish the terms from scratch. When you talk about what you paid for your house, you inform your social circle about the financial parameters of your life, in ways that inevitably shape how people position financial asks, collaborations, and expectations toward you. When you mention a large transaction or a successful year, you adjust the lens through which everyone present evaluates what is appropriate to expect from you in every subsequent context that involves money. The financially sophisticated have learned, through experience or through observation of people who learned through experience, that casual financial disclosure almost always gives more away than it receives. The conversation moves on. You have gained nothing except perhaps a moment of social recognition that fades within minutes, but the information you deposited into the other person's understanding of you persists. It affects their behavior toward you in ways that are subtle, largely unconscious, and consistently disadvantageous to you in any context where money is being discussed or decided. The silence is not secretive, it is strategic. It is the behavior of someone who has understood that their financial information has the same properties as any valuable asset and treats it accordingly. You do not give assets away for free. You deploy them where they generate returns. The second dimension of the wealthy person's financial silence is the understanding that the performance of wealth is a form of liability. Every visible marker of financial success that you deploy in your social presentation is a claim you are making about your position. And claims create expectations. Expectations create obligations. And obligations in the financial domain are extraordinarily expensive. The person who signals their income through their visible consumption creates a social contract with everyone who reads that signal. The contract says, "This is who I am. This is what I have. This is the level at which I operate." And once the contract is established, breaking it has costs. The colleague who saw the car and drew conclusions about your financial position now has expectations about how you will respond to financial requests, whether for charity, for rounds at dinner, for contributions to group gifts, for the scale of your participation in any shared financial context. The friend who saw the house has calibrated their sense of what is a lot of money to you based on what you spent on it. The professional contact who learned your salary has anchored their sense of your value and your negotiating position to that number. All of these expectations constrain you, all of them limit your options, all of them were created by the performance, and the only way to avoid the constraint is to never establish the claim in the first place. The truly wealthy understand this, not always consciously. So sometimes it is simply an instinct, absorbed from watching other wealthy people, that financial disclosure in social contexts is somehow unseemly. But the instinct is not merely etiquette, it is protection. The person who never establishes what they have retains the freedom to be whatever the context requires. They can negotiate without a known floor. They can give generously when they choose without being held to a standard created by their visible consumption. They can scale back their lifestyle without anyone noticing, because no one had a fixed sense of what their lifestyle was. They preserve optionality. And optionality is one of the most valuable and most underappreciated financial assets a person can hold. The third dimension is the one that I find most practically significant and most rarely discussed. The truly wealthy are silent about money because they have shifted from thinking about what they have to thinking about what their money is doing. And what money is doing is not a conversational topic. It is a technical question with ongoing answers that matter only to the person tracking them. The person who is focused on their net worth as a number, on their salary as a status signal, on their asset values as markers of position, is looking at money as a static possession, something to be displayed and confirmed, something whose primary function is to establish where they stand. The person who is focused on their portfolio allocation, their investment returns, their passive income generation relative to their expenses, their tax efficiency, the trajectory of their compounding, is looking at money as a dynamic system, something to be managed and optimized, something whose primary function is to produce more of itself over time. The shift from thinking about what you have to thinking about what your money is doing is one of the most important and least visible transitions in the psychology of wealth building. Before the shift, money is the destination. You are trying to accumulate it, display it, have enough of it. After the shift, money is the vehicle. You are trying to deploy it, grow it, make it work. Make it work. Before the shift, having a certain amount is the goal, and the feelings associated with having it, the security, the status, the validation, are what you are chasing. After the shift, what the money produces is the goal, and the money itself is a means rather than an end. And this shift changes not only how you make financial decisions, but how you talk about money, because there is simply nothing to say. You are not chasing a feeling, you are managing a system. Systems are managed in spreadsheets and conversations with advisors, not in dinner table announcements or social media captions. Let me talk now about what this means for you practically, because everything I have described so far is observation and analysis. An observation without implication is just an interesting picture with no useful consequence. The implication is this: the degree to which you talk about money, think about money in terms of what it says about you, rather than what it can build, and make financial decisions based on how they will be perceived, rather than what they will produce, is the degree to which you are performing wealth, rather than building it. And performing wealth is a game you cannot win, because the audience for the performance is infinite and perpetually unsatisfied, while the resources available for the performance are finite and increasingly depleted by it. There is a specific reason the audience is never satisfied, and it is important to understand it precisely because it explains why the performing person always needs to escalate. Social comparison is a relative mechanism, not an absolute one. It does not measure what you have against a fixed standard. It measures what you have against what the people around you have, and since the people around you are also performing and escalating their own signals, the reference point moves continuously upward. The car that established your position 2 years ago is now one tier below the cars your social circle is driving. The neighborhood that signaled your arrival is now one step behind where the signal-conscious people you know have moved. The vacation that generated the appropriate social response last year is now the entry-level version of what produces recognition this year. You cannot win the game, because the game does not have a winning condition. It only has an escalating cost of participation, and the people who are playing it most intensely are the ones paying the highest price for a victory that cannot occur. The truly wealthy are not playing this game, not because they are noble, not because they are indifferent to how they are perceived, but because they play a different game entirely, and the different game has a winning condition. The winning condition is financial independence, the point at which your assets generate enough income to support your life without your labor. That is a real and achievable destination. It has a specific number. You can calculate the distance to it. You can measure your progress toward it. It does not require anyone else's validation or comparison or participation. It is won silently, by one person managing one system, making one compounding decision at a time. The silence is not a style choice. It is the sound of someone playing a different game, a winnable one. The exit from the performing game begins with an internal audit, not a financial audit, a motivational audit. For every significant financial decision you have made in the last year, ask yourself honestly, was this decision made primarily in service of what you are building, or primarily in service of how you are seen? Was the car chosen for what it can do, or for what it says? Was the apartment or house sized for what you need, or for what it represents? Were the restaurant choices, the travel choices, the clothing choices, made for the experience and the function, or for the signal they send to people whose opinion you are using as a substitute for your own sense of where you stand? The audit is not comfortable. It is not supposed to be. Its purpose is to make visible the proportion of your financial resources that are currently being consumed by the performance rather than directed toward the building. What you find in that audit is the gap between the financial life you are performing and the financial life you are building. And the gap for most people is significantly larger than they expected, because the performance is so normalized, because everyone around you is performing, because the entire consumer economy is an elaborate machine designed to make the performance feel necessary and the building feel optional. Because the people who are silently building, the ones who drive the 10-year-old car and live in the house that does not announce its price and never mention what they earn, are invisible. Their silence makes them invisible, and the visibility of the performers creates a false impression that performance is what financial success looks like, when performance is frequently what financial stagnation looks like from the outside. The truly wealthy are hidden in plain sight behind the loudly performing people who have far less than they appear to have. You see the performers because they want to be seen. You do not see the builders because they are focused on something other than being seen. The genuinely wealthy, the people who have built something real and lasting and functional, tend to share certain quiet characteristics. They are curious about money in a technical, rather than emotional way. They talk about investment structures, about tax efficiency, about the management of specific financial decisions, in contexts where those conversations are appropriate and productive, with people who share that technical interest. They find these conversations genuinely interesting, the way a craftsperson finds the technical details of their craft interesting, not as performance but as engagement with something they care about and have invested themselves in understanding. But they do not signal in social contexts. They do not drop numbers. They do not reach for financial details when simpler information would serve the conversation just as well. They have the comfortable, quiet confidence of people who know exactly where they stand and do not need others to confirm it. They are not trying to convince you of anything. They are not establishing a position. They are simply present, their financial life running in the background, doing its work, requiring no announcement, because the work is the point, not the recognition of the work. This is also why the observation of genuine wealth, when you have access to it, is so instructive. Not the observation of people who appear wealthy, the observation of people who are. The distinction is visible once you know what to look for. The person who is performing wealth draws attention to it. The person who has it draws attention to everything else. They are curious about you, about ideas, about the world, in a way that is not deflected or made anxious by financial comparison, because financial comparison is simply not happening for them. They have no position to defend and nothing to establish. They are free, in the most literal sense, from the social game that most people are playing around money. And that freedom, the freedom of someone who has resolved their financial identity and no longer needs the external validation of the performance, produces a quality of presence that is unmistakable once you have seen it enough times to recognize it. The freedom is the product, not the number. The freedom from needing to establish the number, and the freedom, importantly, can be built before the number arrives. Not completely, not with the full ease of someone who has genuinely arrived. But the practice of it, the deliberate choosing of building over performing, produces a version of that freedom in smaller increments with every decision. Every time you choose the functional car over the signal car, you are practicing the freedom. Every time you redirect the money that would have gone to the performance into the account that builds toward independence, you are practicing the freedom. Every time you allow a conversation about money to pass without volunteering your financial position into it, you are practicing the silence that is the sound of the freedom. And practice, compounded across enough time, builds the thing itself. The wealthy are silent because they are free. The freedom came from the building. The building came from the silence. It is a circle, and you can enter it at any point, in either direction, from wherever you are right now. Start with the silence. Start with the next conversation about money that you allow to pass without performing in it. Start with the next financial decision you make by asking what it builds rather than what it signals. Start there, just there, and the circle begins. From wealth as something you perform to wealth as something you have, from financial anxiety, managed through display, to financial security, that requires no display because it is not anxiety at all. It is simply the settled, functional, unremarkable condition of a person who built something real and knows it without needing anyone else to confirm it. I want to give you something specific to watch for in yourself, because the performance to building shift does not happen all at once. It happens incrementally, decision by decision, and each decision either moves you toward the silence of the builder or keeps you in the noise of the performer. The decisions to watch are not the big ones. The big decisions, the house, the car, the career choice, are visible enough that most people at least think about them. The decisions to watch are the small ones, the ones that happen reflexively, automatically, without deliberation. The meal ordered at a restaurant when you are with people you want to impress. The version of an item chosen when a cheaper version would serve exactly the same function. The story told at a dinner party that happened to include a number you did not need to include. The social media post that framed an experience in a way that communicated cost or access or membership in a certain tier. These small decisions, made dozens of times a week, add up to either a consistent pattern of performing or a consistent pattern of building, and the pattern is not set by the occasional large decision. It is set by the everyday automatic ones. The way to change the pattern is not to white-knuckle your way through the performing impulse every time it arises. That is exhausting and unsustainable, and produces the joyless, anxious financial discipline that nobody wants and very few people maintain. The way to change it is to shift the identity underneath the decisions. When your identity is that of a person who is building something, the impulse to perform becomes less frequent and less compelling, not because you have suppressed it, but because it is simply less relevant to who you are. A builder does not reach for the signal, a builder reaches for the tool, and the reaching for the tool becomes automatic when you have genuinely decided that building is what you are doing. That decision is available to you right now, not after a certain number is reached, not after the circumstances change, or the income increases, or the debt is cleared. Right now, in this moment, with the financial life you actually have, you can decide that what your money is doing matters more than what people think you have. You can decide that your internal scorecard is the one you optimize for. You can decide that the silence of the builder is the version of financial life you are choosing. And from that decision, slowly and without drama, and entirely without announcement, a different financial life begins to grow. If you want to know where your financial psychology actually is right now, the most honest indicator is not your bank balance or your investment portfolio or your net worth. It is what you do when money comes up in conversation. Do you reach for it? Do you volunteer information that was not requested? Do you feel the pull to establish your position, to signal your level, to make sure the people around you understand what you have or what you earn, or what things cost you? If the answer is yes, you are not yet where the wealthy are. Not because of your numbers, because of your relationship with your numbers. And the relationship with the numbers is where everything starts, because the relationship determines the decisions, and the decisions, compounded across years, determine the numbers. Change the relationship, not the number. The relationship. Because the number will follow the relationship much more reliably than the relationship will follow the number. More money given to a person who performs their financial identity does not produce the quiet, settled, functional relationship with money that the truly wealthy have. It produces a more expensive performance. And a more expensive performance produces a faster depletion of whatever the number was. There is no amount of money that cures the performing impulse. There is only the decision to stop performing, which can be made with any amount, which can be made today. The truly wealthy do not talk about money because they do not need to. And the day you stop needing to is not the day your account reaches a specific number. It is the day your relationship with what the number means changes. That day can be today. It does not require a different balance. It requires a different orientation. One that turns attention from the audience watching the performance to the system being built. One that shifts the definition of financial success from what other people can see to what your money is quietly doing. One that makes the silence feel not like concealment, but like completion. That silence is what wealth actually sounds like. And it is available to you before the number arrives, which is also, not coincidentally, one of the reasons the number eventually arrives.